Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we begin to bring 2021 to a close. As I've been mentioning over the last several days, we've been contemplating 2021 and this extraordinarily epic year, and beginning to think through of all the sessions we've had over the last 12 months. What are the themes? What are the challenges? And what are the truths that we as human beings, as we seek to enable humanity to rise, what should we be embracing in this moment? We know that the pandemic that was officially declared in March of 2020 is not going away. The virus has proven itself to be adaptive, intractable, and extremely resilient, even to vaccinations. We are in a world also of rising internal conflicts within our societies. We've seen stresses of all kinds emerge all over the world as people who went through lockdown and social distancing and long periods without jobs and not being able to go to work and worried about our health and well-being and not sure about the future, and everything from alcoholism to drug abuse to violence to crime to domestic abuse against women. Everything has been on the rise. And we come now to the end of the year. And as we look toward 2022, we want to be hopeful. We are aware that we're in code red. But we're also aware, as has been said, things are getting certainly worse and worse, faster and faster, but they're also getting better and better, faster and faster. And we've been celebrating in Humanity Rising as much as we can all the good things that are happening out there in the world, and there are many of them. And our world is therefore, in this extraordinarily amalgamation of worse and worse, better and better, faster and faster. And we're now moving into 2022. One note with which we want to end our time this year is around the indigenous mind and the indigenous peoples and the indigenous truths that we know, certainly on Humanity Rising, but the mainstream culture has so marginalized and so systematically undermined that how we understand indigenous mind, indigenous truths, how we seek at this moment of duress to integrate them into our modernity, into our technology, into our urban cultures. Maybe one of the most intriguing, and I would say more morally compelling questions that we want to take up as we conclude 2021. Because it's only through an alignment with nature, and not only an alignment with nature, but an integration of ourselves into nature and nature into ourselves in a new way, so that we embrace our true identity as children of the earth, and we speak the mother tongue, we learn again the mother tongue, that is going to suffice to save us now. So that's the tonality of today and tomorrow. And we decided that we wanted to bring in voices of the indigenous peoples of North America for this particular occasion. We've had Indigenous speakers from all over the world, as you know. But on this particular occasion, we just wanted to bring in some Indigenous voices from the North American continent. So we'd like to begin with some blessings, and we'd like to start with Constance Buffalo of the Anishinaabe, a tribe known more popularly as the Chippewa Nation, to give us a blessing. And then we'll have Lewis Cardinal of the Woodland Cree to give us an opening blessing, so we can just embrace consecrated space for this conversation. But thank you all for joining us today. Humanity Rising is built and sustained on your participation, and it's one of the great joys of my life right now, and for Ubiquity University to have such a potent and global participation from over 130 countries all over the world that are seeking in ways that are inventive and collegial and deeply inspiring to enable humanity to rise. So it's in that spirit that I welcome you. And Constance, please give us an opening invocation.
Bonjour, bonjour, Jim, and thank you for your good words. So as I'm going to use the word Gishimanidu, which is our word for that ubiquitous presence that fills all life with its flow of generosity and connection. So Gishimanidu, Miigwech, what I hear now and what I feel now, I hold in my heart forever. And as we look at the snows falling, I don't know if you can see that, but we remember all the blessings that are pouring down upon us for people everywhere, from all the corners of the world, and upon every circumstance that we face, is that every circumstance is blessed with all the goodness that is in our hearts and is being called to rise right now in this very moment. And we are so grateful for all of those who are responding to that call and who are raising their voices and giving their all to the earth and to all her creation, because it's in this that we find our faith and our hope and our ongoing dedication to all that exists around us, all that exists in and through us, and all that has been given to us by our elders and our grandparents and all those who've gone before us. And we offer our own blessings to those that we share this beautiful earth with, to those of the four-leggeds and the two-leggeds and the crawlers and the creepers and all those who, because of them, we exist. And Lewis, would you please add your words to this blessing and this celebration of life in all its beauty?
Thank you, Connie, for those beautiful words. And thank you, Jim, for the wonderful introduction and setting the tone and the pace. I would like to start with this is Tanse nitotentek naskomten awa. I'm grateful for you all. And Tatawao, there is room here in the circle. And I ask the Creator to watch over all of us, each and every one of you, and to bless you, to shine the light on you and into your heart as we have this important discussion today. I ask Mother Earth to hear what we have to say as we work towards changing what is in our hearts and in our minds and how we live in peace and harmony with Mother Earth. I'm also grateful and call our ancestors, all of your ancestors, to gather around you and my ancestors to gather around me, to inspire me and to encourage me so that we can make the changes that we need to do for generations to come. I am grateful.
Thank you, Constance. Thank you, Lewis. Pila is now joining us, Pila, Colorado, the Iroquois and Celtic peoples. Pila, join us and provide an added blessing for our time together.
Good morning, everyone. I had a little trouble with getting my link and getting things, getting me going. As we come together this morning, considering how to bring the worlds together, the world of separation with the world of union, the world of fragmentation with the world of integrity and completion. Thinking of this before us each day, we find that in all the ravages of capitalism and all the ravages of history, that nothing can take from us the knowledge of how to be. With each breath, the in, the out, and the pause between, we're reminded of wholeness, of completion. And just like if we do not breathe in this cycle, we perish. So is the message then for going forward today. The reality of bringing the exterior and the interior together through the pause. May we pause this morning, and in that pause, receive the wisdom, the guidance, and the ancestors that we need, are born to be a part of, so we might step lightly and well on this earth and on the path of renewal and regeneration. Amam.
Thank you, Apila. Natayo, would you like to just add your voice to the opening blessing for our time together?
Hello there. I'm not able to start my video.
It's all right. We can hear your voice fine.
Oh, good.
Try it again, Natalia.
There we go. Oki Nixaquat. Hello, my relatives. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, Jim, for opening this space to us all to be able to share our thoughts. I give such thanks to Creator for all this life and this day that we have here to share together, these beautiful moments. And I don't have much to add. All that was so beautiful, but I would just like to say in my Blackfoot language, Ispom kinana ki e somatso kinan suksipatsini, which means help us, Creator, and guide us to a good life. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Natayo. Thank you all. So let's just dive in here. And I think Milt Markowitz, we want to start with you because Milt has really been the one working with me over the last several weeks, months really, to begin to shape these conversations around relational leadership, around how we mainstream Indigenous wisdom. Milt comes out of a very distinguished career in IBM. He's been very deeply immersed in Indigenous studies and ceremony and awareness for many years, and really was carrying a deep passion, I would say, Milt, to bring this conversation together with Lewis and various others. So Milt, why don't you in your own way frame the issues that you think are just sort of up for human culture at this moment in relationship to Indigenous leadership and wisdom?
You're muted, Mel.
I just unmuted. Thank you, Jim, and thank you each for the beautiful opening and prayers. I think before I frame it, I would just in the thank you say how important it is, I think, to me personally, and I think to everyone in the world, that the messages that you give in prayer are elevated in a way that that the Indigenous voice is raised, not just to be an equal, but to be saying something that we really need to hear. And we need to understand, how do you know what you know that underlies those words? And what is it that we don't seem to know, we don't know? And it all started with me when I got involved in sustainability, and I just felt that it was the Indigenous message over and over and over again that resonated with me, that said, yes, this is what we need to understand. And it wasn't an intellectual understanding so much as it was that, as Ilarion Merculieff would say, we don't have a word for sustainability in our culture. We embody it. We live it every day. And when you live it every day, that message comes forth in a way that can't be spoken by someone who hasn't lived it every day. And so it's with gratitude that I thank each of you for that prayer. I think that what became very clear to me was this whole notion that the consciousness that creates a problem isn't sufficient for addressing it. We credit that to Einstein, but it's really come from Indigenous people in the prophecies and so forth. And what I was really drawn to was the Hopi teaching that if you ever want to move to a different consciousness, you need to embody it. And it seemed to me that this is the challenge of our work. How do we embody this really what has become a foreign understanding of life in the world? And so my work with Jim, why I connected with him, what I shared with him, and I'll share it a little later if it seems appropriate, is really a combination of a process and a plan. It seems to me that the non-native world, the modernity, needs a plan. To be given code red and all of the issues with it and not have a plan for addressing it leaves people very paralyzed. But if I return to the native embodiment, how do we embody this? Then a plan emerges quite easily and quite readily. And what it is for me is an understanding that the earth was given to us in balance and harmony, and nature was our sole mentor. And somehow or other that changed. And I remember talking with Ilarion Merculieff about this and saying this had to be a paradigm shift of the greatest magnitude. And he said, we agree. And I said, well, how long ago did that happen? And he said, 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. So this all began with the separation from the earth. And what I picture in my mind is that the earth has been evolving for this several thousand years. But when we look at what we've wrought and the human responsibility for it, then I think, how have we devolved, humankind devolved, not all humankind. And fortunately, there are people like we have on this broadcast right now who have continued to live that earth wisdom. And so I think a big piece of the work is to address that ethical shortfall. And for those of you that know me, I've worked a lot in interfaith, worked with the Parliament of World Religions, with the United Religions Initiative. How do we look introspectively at ourselves and say, what have we wrought? Not with just beating ourselves up, but with the honest understanding that we're not leaving this world anywhere near better than where we entered it, particularly my generation. We've seen this devolvement. And I think the approach for doing this is for us to recognize that we need to create bridges, really important bridges, to recognize that that the Indigenous people have an intuitive understanding of quantum reality, that there's a different reality than we understand in our culture. And there are many things like this. They understand at a very deep level how to blend apparent opposites, how to blend hierarchy and relationship into a relational way of being, whereas we have turned to hierarchy in almost every way. So the notion that we live in a total field of awareness, this quantum field, and that we can connect with all life, brings us to a place of understanding spirit that isn't understood in the Western world. And it was very interesting. I was working with Lewis not so long ago for the Parliament of World Religions that was held about 3 years ago. And we were talking about having a ride from Toronto to Ottawa and possibly to Washington, D.C., and carrying the messages of the Parliament. And the ride, for a number of reasons, logistics and maybe some politics and so forth, was falling apart. And I wrote an email trying to bring it back together again. And I got the most beautiful email from Alberta Iron Cloud Miller, who said to me, Milt, you can't organize this. If there's not spirit, it's not going to happen. And she was so right. And what I'm feeling is that in this modernity world that we created, there isn't spirit. And so these good things aren't going to happen. And the question is, how do we bring that spirit back into the world, that sense of spirit, that understanding deep in modernity culture? And I think it's a reawakening of an already knowing. I really believe I teach living systems in classes, give me one class period with the kids, and they will move to a paradigm shift from who they're being today and in doing social justice work to who they want to be in their life work, which is understanding these Indigenous ways and bringing an earth-based wisdom back into our culture. So I think we can do all of this work, and when we do it, I think it will elevate, as I mentioned, the Indigenous message, not just into some equal place, but into some place where it awakens that already knowing and it elevates all of us. And I think in doing that, I think that the Indigenous peoples of the world can join with the non-Indigenous peoples of the world to open up that already knowing and give us embodiment experiences that we so need in order to make this paradigm shift. So
thank you, Milt.
I think that that's enough said. Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for being here. And I just want to sit back and listen now for the next hour.
Beautiful. Apila, I would like to turn to you next. You know, Apila works through a global network and is probably in touch, Apila, with more Indigenous peoples and elders around the world, and at least anybody that I know through the World Indigenous Science Network and major work that you've been doing globally. In light of what Milt was just saying, how would you characterize sort of the state of Indigenous peoples as you know them around the world? Are they empowered? Are they being decimated? Are they moving in? What's been your experience of the state of Indigenous peoples globally at this moment?
Good morning, everybody. It's very early where I live in Hawaii. So I'm going to start my day with deep thought and good questions. Thank you, Jim. The state of the Indigenous worldview, consciousness, thinking as Indigenous in the sense that we're all separate, but we all have a common root, which is the reality of creation and our own specific creation stories to guide us. But where we're at is a really interesting change. We went historically from being invisible people to, in some quarters, becoming the savior of the planet. Within Native communities around the world, the situation is different. What we have to offer, what we have to offer, how we look at things, and our willingness to work across tribal lines, across racial lines, across historical trauma depends. Some tribes are willing to join hands, some tribes aren't, and especially in the United States, now we're quite litigious, fighting to preserve our lands and our rights. And in Canada, somewhat the same, although in Canada, there's a policy of reconciliation. And maybe that's a good point to bring up for this circle or this panel of people this morning. Reconciliation is a fabulous idea. How do we return to a way of thinking, of knowing and being that we haven't been able to exercise or live in or do? If it's white people, and I'm half French, it's white people, maybe it's been 1,000 years since the Catholic Church and Inquisition, and before that, the Romans, maybe 2,000 years since we've been able to think in this Indigenous way. Others, like on my Oneida side, in Canada, more blessed, still on original lands and language pretty good. And then you come to those of us in Wisconsin that were relocated. Well, when I was growing up, the culture had been so suppressed, and we were so oppressed that there wasn't much left. The ceremonies weren't being practiced. The language was dying out. So I bring this up to say that there isn't like one Indigenous situation or people we can look to or call upon that has the perfection of indigenosity that the whole world could go to. The closest model I know of, if we're looking to say what is the way out of the horror, the absolute horror we're living in, where every day we get up and we're forced to participate knowingly and unknowingly in the destruction of the earth and our children and grandchildren's survival. Like, where do we look? Where is a way out, right? One group of people is the Yawanawa, and the Yawanawa live on a tributary of the Amazon River, so far west, their land almost abuts up to Peru. The people are living in a traditional life, but their chief can speak 4 languages, and the communities, thousands of Yawanawa, made decisions about what to bring in modernity and what to leave out. So they have internet, but they're still living traditionally, right? And they welcome people into their community, non-embodied Indigenous people. That's how, instead of saying white people or people who are lost, I'll use the lost from Indigenous ways. I'll say non-Indigenous bodied people. So are invited into the culture, but must sign a contract when you come to visit and agree at a time you leave, right? So bringing these two worlds together, Jim and I have worked together on this over the years off and on. And I, in my lifetime, created a master's and PhD in Indigenous mind, Indigenous science, because I reasoned that if we want to bring the two worlds together, and I had to think about it because I'm Oneata Aga and I'm French, or Gaul, and how do I bring these two parts of myself together? It was a journey, for a serious, deep journey from young adulthood on. So what I noticed is there's no place, there's no particularly designated sacred site to do this. And I got this idea, well, it would be good if we knew the place to go to. And in the meantime, I thought I will create an academic program that helps do that. And that's what I've done, bringing our two mindsets together, being conscious in it. It's completely normal to do so. Just that it's just that we haven't done it for a long time. And when I was young, in the American Indian movement, one day we were having a community meeting, and we were getting, as young people, we were getting angry and saying things like "power to the people" and "right on," and then the topic came up about our ceremonies and so forth, and there was a silence in the room of us young activists, and the silence was facing the loss of all that our culture had suffered, the loss of ceremony, loss of language, like loss of genetics that were exclusively Oneida, all these losses, and loss of land and loss of rights, and so we're thinking all of that. And the Sioux elder, Rufus Kilscrugnion, was sitting back against a wall, and he was just listening for the longest time. And then he cleared his throat, and we all snapped to, because we revered this guy, actually, because he held what we were looking for, identity, right? And that ability to be one with the earth and with each other. And he said this, and I'll let it go at this. He said this: the power is not lost, you are. Well, that was the door opening, and a door closing to seeing myself as a victim.
Wow, powerful words. The power is not lost, you are. It's extraordinary. Thank you, Apila. Constance, I'd like to turn to you, because like Apila, you've had experiences all over the world, with Gene Houston, among others, as you've sought to bring lost people back to their power. So I would love to have your comment on Apila's last remark in light of your experience working on these matters, but with reference, obviously, to the Indigenous wisdom that you yourself carry. And I was struck by your comment earlier, as we were preparing for the program. We were talking about the shamanic mind, and Constance said in her tribe, there is no shaman, because everybody's the shaman. Everybody embodies what it is that they're looking for. So speak to us about these matters from your vantage point.
Well, it's interesting I love listening. Thank you so much, Apila and Milt, for sharing so eloquently. I didn't actually say everybody's a shaman, because we don't have that. It's like everybody is Anishinaabe, is that everybody is to be connected is like to breathe. So it's not that we have a designation, it's just about who we are. And so as I was thinking about what you're saying, several things came to mind. The first is that I live up here very close to my reservation, but I'm in between a lot of reservations. I'm right on Lake Superior, and our tribes around here they're not, you have to think about, they are scientists, they are keepers of the earth, but they've gone to college and they're educated and they're bringing all of that knowledge as we're protecting our sloughs and as we're stopping pipelines. And one of the pipelines that we've been fussing with has just pulled up stakes, and the armaments that were dropped in Lake Superior, down in Superior, we've been fighting those we've been advocating and just bringing more information and more information. And now those armaments are being cleared up, that we're leaching toxic chemicals into Lake Superior. And so I think that here, at least, there's a balance between, in many ways, with the available knowledge and the intrinsic values that we carry. And so when I'm saying that, I'm also thinking about earlier comments and thinking about, well, how do we change? How do we address other people's ways of thinking? And I think that we have, our cosmological roots are different. Our original stories are different. And if we're going to see any significant rethinking, those original stories may need to be expanded. So in the Judeo-Christian traditions, it is one of God is up there and man, and I'm talking about man, is here, and he is to dominate all the animals and women. So we have this intrinsic value system in the Judeo-Christian tradition of this hierarchical structure where man is up there and is to dominate the earth. And so that's what we've grown up as an unconscious assumption. We have many in the Western world have unconsciously assimilated that understanding, that assumption that that's the way life is supposed to go. And in our native cultures, we have a whole different original story. And that original story was a balance. And in our stories, it is Star Woman, and it is, in many cultures, native cultures, it's the influence of something more than ourselves that has taught us how to live and has taught us that we are related to all things, and that it is because of the others that we share the planet with that we have life. It is because we have the plants, and it is because we have the animals, and it is because we have all of our relations. So relations aren't defined by being a two-legged. Relations are defined as being everything that has come before us, including the waters and the mountains and the rocks and all of the creatures that live and that share life with us. So we have this sense, this inherent sense of kinship. So that when we say for all my relations, or when I pray to my ancestors, I am not praying, I'm not bringing in just my grandmother and grandpa, my lineage. My lineage is all that has gone before me. It is the creation of the oceans, and it is the creation of the rivers, and it is the creation of the star, the cosmos within which we live and that we are in relationship to. And so it's this extension of ourselves as a part of this circle that creates a whole different relationship. You talk about, Kurt Milch, you talked about a relational way of being. It's like we grew up with knowing that when it was like in Colorado, I would go hiking every day and I go camping. And I love to go camping by myself because when night comes, all my other senses open up. And so I would always find myself up in the mountains, and I'd wander the mountains until 2 or 3 in the morning when the thunder beings would come. And we say that when the thunder beings come and the lightning comes, it is the grandfathers who are the thunder beings who are coming to make love with the earth. You don't want to get in the way. So you want to be in your tent before that occurs. And so I got lost in the mountains one day, and I went and took my asema, my tobacco, and went over to one of the tall evergreens, and I said, "Grandfather, this is who I am." I introduced myself. I told him where I came from. I told him my lineage. I introduced myself as I would to anyone, and said, I need your help because I'm lost. And here comes back to Appella's story of being lost. I was truly lost in the forest, and I could hear the thunder rolling, and you don't want to be walking in the woods when the lightning starts dancing on the mountaintop. And so over my shoulder, as I was praying, over my shoulder flew this really large raven. And this raven flew over me and landed about 20 feet in front of me. And here comes more asema, Miigwech. I'm so glad you're here, with the assumption that that raven came to assist me, which he did. So that raven flew tree to tree to tree to tree for like 25 minutes to take me back to my camp, where a beautiful red fox was waiting for me. So that's the way that we assume the world is to work. And it does. So it's not going back to Milt's earlier statement of how do we know that these things are true? How do we know that we're in relationship? It's because we live it. And I can remember my companion, who is the pipe carrier of my tribe. I belong to the Red Cliff Band of Chippewa, and he was driving in Wisconsin. We have these roadways, these dirt roads where the trees grow like 30 feet tall or more. It's all old forest. And he's driving. We had been doing ceremony up at Little Bear Bay. And so he's driving in front of me in his little white car. And above him, like this far above him, is this hawk that flies the entire half mile. And that was natural. That's the way things are supposed to be, is that we have that affinity that we carry. There's, in modern terms, we might call it a resonant field, but that affinity that we carry, there's a response to it. And that's why I think that we're in the time of our 7th fire prophecies, the 7th of our prophecies, and it's a double prophecy, and it says that it's our time, that all that was lost to us will be recovered. The prophecy before said that the children would be taken away and forget what their relationship was, and now is a time when our language is being restored, and there's this whole sense of renewal. And I keep thinking that the brain is drawn more quickly to the negative than it is the positive. And if we are to really start embodying the promise that we have 2 roads to choose, we can choose the red road or the black road. And it's not going to be that we're going to feel the whether we stayed in self-serving or whether we became we renewed our relationship to the earth, that we're going to feel it and all things are going to fall around us. No, it's for our children's children that will have the repercussions of those decisions that we're making. And we have that you are embodying now, Jim, and the people who are on this call and all my relations who I'm sharing this podium with, you are embodying what was our 4th fire prophecy. Our 4th fire prophecy was that the light-skinned ones were coming, and that it was a dual prophecy. If they came in friendship, then the two of us would create, our two cultures could create a way of living that could be greater than either of us could have created by ourselves. But if they come in villainy, pack up your longhouses and your wigwams and hit the road, because this is very dangerous. And you can tell the difference by whether they come with their hand open or whether they come bearing arms. Well, in our past, we know what happened. And the tragedy of our decimation is still being felt today. But I believe that as we think of all time being more simultaneous, that this is a time where we can renew that fourth fire prophecy and really do come together and create not the despair, create with our power of both of our civilizations, of both of our societies, and bring our power together and fulfill that fourth fire prophecy of creating something bigger, something more powerful than could ever have existed before, if we had been coming from our adolescence of our maturation as humans. Then what if we're in that bridge time of coming into our adulthood, and going from adolescence to adulthood always carries these upheavals and this craziness. Our hormones are going crazy, just like some of our society is doing things that we would never imagine doing to each other. So maybe this is the time of our maturation where we do come together and we do embody it by stopping whatever does not serve the whole. And we become warriors in our own rights. Each of us becomes warriors. The warrior was not the one with the high testosterone. The warrior was the one who would give his life or her life for the good of the whole. That's all.
Thank you so much. That was a powerful story of you being led by the raven. That's the truth we all need to embody as we recover our lostness and discover for the first time the power that's been there the whole time. That's a beautiful, beautiful story. Lewis, you've also had deep experience around the world with Indigenous peoples and religions. You've heard what Constance said about the very specific dichotomized, dualistic worldview of the Abrahamic religions. You traversed those times. What would you say to this question of the power's not lost, we're lost, and we have to find our way back?
Yes, well, first let me say this, is that I really appreciate Connie and Apella's sharing and their knowledge and their wisdom. It reminded me of something my grandfather taught me when I was a very young man. He said, it will be woman who teaches you how to be warrior. And of course, as a young man, you kind of scoff at those sort of things. But as I moved through life, I learned rather quickly that that is the truth. And so I really do appreciate Connie, Apella, and Natello for being here today and sharing their strength and wisdom with us all. In my travels around the world and working with Indigenous cultures and leaders and medicine people, we all have that common message that we are in a time of great change. And we knew through prophecy that this was going to happen. But we also knew through our prophecy that Indigenous people have a role. And as the prophecies had pointed out, there is coming a time when the red man will have to teach his white brother once again and gift them with the knowledge that they have forgotten. So the role of Indigenous people, I believe, today is to remind our brothers and sisters around the world what they have forgotten. and how to live in balance and harmony once again. One of the teachings that I've learned is that when you learn to live in peace and harmony with Mother Earth, you will learn also how to live in peace and harmony with each other. And so this knowledge and this wisdom, while I say those words, really comes from connection to Mother Earth, connection to the great mystery, connection to our ancestors who talk to us all the time. We are surrounded by spiritual beings and entities that we have connection to, that continue to guide us. And we've forgotten about that. And not only non-Indigenous people, but some of my own Indigenous people have forgotten those connections as well. And we're working as hard as we can to reconnect. We are entering or have entered into an age of Renaissance, if you will, with Indigenous cultures, traditions, and languages. We knew way back when that when the buffalo were leaving, that they would also return. And when they returned, the Indigenous people would return back to their culture, tradition, ceremonies, and languages. And so ceremony then becomes a really important part of maintaining balance and harmony. The circle is, is a symbol. It's the oldest human symbol, or one of the oldest human symbols that you can find in rock art, cave art around the world, Lascaux, Australia, those sorts of things. But what does that circle tell us? Well, it tells us a couple things, at least. One of which is that the circle represents the individual. It also represents the collective or the community. And they are both one and the same, because the individual needs the community and the community needs the individual. So in order to maintain that relationship where one learns from the other, you have to have ceremony as the fulcrum of balance between both. And those ceremonies bring us into harmony, because the big issue with human beings is that we are very destructive, or we have the capacity of becoming very destructive and walk out of balance easily. But also we have the capability of great love and creativity on the other side. So ceremonies, from the way that I was taught, is that ceremonies help us to get that balance back. So when things go out of balance, then ceremony helps us to get back into balance, into harmony, but not only with each other, but with Mother Earth and the animals and everything that lives on Mother Earth. Ceremony is the key. And if we Indigenous people had any direction to give to the rest of the world, that is, remember your ceremony, because nations of people are indigenous to where they come from. All humanity is indigenous. The problem is that we have severed ourselves from that indigenous root, our connection to Mother Earth. And we need to make that reconnection in order to learn balance and harmony, in order to practice balance and harmony in all our relations. And so then ceremony becomes that important part. Languages of nations are shaped by the land from which they come. And when I say we are all indigenous, it is because if we go back in our family trees, thousands of years perhaps, for some, and some as recent as a few generations ago, we will see that ceremonies and relationship with Mother Earth has taught us ceremonies that need to be done. We are stewards to the different parts of the world from which our people come. And within that stewardship, there are songs and ceremonies that we need to practice in order to achieve that balance. And the integration of that indigenous knowledge within yourself teaches you how to walk in that sacred manner, how to walk in a respectful way with all life that is around you, because we are not alone. I think we're taught through recent Western worldviews that we are individuals and that we are alone fundamentally, and that other people want our stuff. So our relationship then with other human beings starts off on the wrong foot. So Descartes and Hegel and all those philosophers talked about, the animal mentality of human beings, and that we're nothing more than animals without cause or purpose. However, if you know animals, they are nothing but love. They are an expression of love from Mother Earth. And so we've forgotten those teachings, and it's just how we set ourselves in our mind. When we realize as human beings that we sit in a great circle of life, and within that great circle of life are animals and plants and all the different beings that we share the planet with. And we as human beings only have but one seat in that great council of life. So we need to then realize that we are not it, that we are only a part of it. These simple teachings don't require a religious epiphany in order to move forward, or a commitment to a religion or a commitment. It's a way of life. It's a way of placing yourself in creation in a very humble way. And from that humility, you practice respect. And you practice the desire to learn more about how you keep yourself in harmony and balance with all things that are around you, and maintaining that connection to your ancestors, because the ancestors are around you. And through ceremony, elders have commented quite frequently, is that the ancestors are asking us, how come you're not asking us for help? We want to help you, we're around you, but you're not talking to us. Let us inspire you. Let us encourage you in the work that you're doing. That's why when I opened the prayer, I said, let's call our ancestors around us all together, because they will also give us knowledge that we've forgotten. And when Apella was talking about, or Connie was talking about the power is lost, the power is not lost, we are. Here in Canada, we say, we have not lost culture, rather culture has lost us. And when we start doing the basic of ceremonies, like we use smudging traditions, you can use different ways, but when you start to focus and utilizing this very elemental parts of ceremony, like prayer, you are connecting to the great mystery, you are connecting to the great source. And that source, when you make that initial connection, can start to bring back knowledge, history, stories, and song. And those, if I was to offer those are the three things that I would gift the world if I could. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lewis. This whole notion of ceremony is key. It's so profoundly true. Ceremony is much more powerful than, all the ideological, doctrinal structures we create in our minds. Just going through these simple ceremonies are really the initiation that we all need at this moment. So thank you for that. And this notion, I think, to Apila's point, the power's not lost, we are. We got lost because we went after a false power. And we got to thinking that we are the council rather than one seat on the council. And that has led us to a complete and utter mess because we, in our arrogance, took ourselves out of the real game. And you've identified it very, very skillfully and well. So thank you so much for that. That's very powerful. I want to turn now to Natoyo. Natoyo has been on Humanity Rising before. She's told her story of being basically abducted, put into a white training program in school, and yet she found her way back. And I'd love to hear your perspective, Natayo, having been through the process, the lostness, the ripping away from who your connection with the power, and yet you were powerful enough internally to find your way back into the Indigenous community that now holds you. As you view these matters of our lostness and our way back, and the powerful way that nature can aid us at this moment, what would be your contribution to this conversation today?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It is my experience to be lost and to make that journey back to the center, back to the circle. And I think it's an incredible topic, and I'm so glad that we're really focusing on this. And I love what Lewis was saying about ceremony, because that is so dear to me, and also calling on your ancestors. And that really settles in my heart so deeply, because as I was so disconnected with myself, so disconnected from family and community and our ways of life, you know, I would often kind of joke, because I knew of my Indigenous background and my connections, but they were so filled with shame and anger and sadness. And I never felt a part of any world or any family or any community. And so it truly was, you know, my ancestors that were my closest family. And had I not been able to maintain that connection, build on that connection, and really seek that guidance in just the small ways that I did, I wouldn't have even began the journey. And so it really is a big part of the disconnection, is not having those ties with our ancestors, not speaking to them. I really do try to make it a part of my day. My daily prayer is to just speak to my ancestors as though they're my best friends. They're my family, my sisters, my brothers, my aunties and uncles. They're all there. And in my own personal journey, as I reflect, you know, it really started with and not being connected with our traditional ceremonies. It was my own ceremony of cleansing in my heart that took place, and letting go of everything that didn't belong and that I no longer needed to carry, whether it was letting go of the systems that were in place that were oppressing me, or the thought patterns that I was continuing that were conditioned into me through assimilation, the ego, anger, fear, shame, and guilt that I carried, and really just letting those go, and telling myself that I'm sorry, and really telling myself I love you, and finding that forgiveness, and reminding myself to be thankful for my journey, and that I continue on. And as we go, you know, we need to pray hard and really ask to recognize the guidance that we're given, to really recognize it. And, you know, I love Connie's story for that reason. As she was lost in the woods, she asked for that help and for that recognition, and she recognized that help and that innate capability that we all have, is there. It's just a matter of tuning into it. And so really what that is adding, you know, it's more of a childlike nature, isn't it? To just be so open in your heart and to really listen to your heart. And so I think that really adding that childlike nature back in after we kind of go through that cleansing of letting go what we don't need, we need to add those medicines, and that childlike nature is something that we should step back into more often and kind of welcome back within our mindset. And then getting back to the return of ceremony, I feel is so deeply profound and important. You know, on my journey, once I was able to return to ceremony, the incredible impact that had was like settling back into myself and going back and being around community and hearing the language of my people it spoke something to me that I didn't need to even understand the words. I would just cry. And so I think that is so incredibly important. And I feel that we're at a time where, as we return to the circle, and we have so many children and adults who are my age who are still lost. You know, I have several siblings that are still lost, whether it's from being put into foster care systems and put through the adoption programs, or whether it's fallen victim to addiction and alcoholism, and all kinds of ways that we can be lost. Welcoming them back in ceremony and in a way that gives them recognition for their strength and their courage, and bringing them back into the circle is so profoundly healing. And without that, you know, we don't really truly have a way forward. And the difficulties that we go through, we kind of get lost in those as well. And the hardships, the chaos that we speak of, makes us lost within our own hearts and in our own minds. And it reminds me of just the pressure of trying to keep going and getting through. That is something that we do learn in ceremony when we go into a sweat lodge, and we must really call on our resilience and our strength to endure the heat and to get through the rounds of the sweat lodge. It reminds me of a story of just a few weeks ago when I was in the lodge. A little girl came in, and she sat next to me and her father, right in between. her father was the pourer of the sweat. And she actually came in because she followed in some strawberries. As we begin our sweat lodge, we feed our ancestors, and so we had some strawberries that we brought in, and she followed them in, and she ended up staying for the first round and sat down, and her dad gave her just a towel to lay under during the heat. And when they closed the door and everything, we began the lodge, and the heat started to rise, and everyone began, and I could hear her whimpering, and kind of she already wanted the door to be opened. And so I leaned down and I started just giving her some encouraging words, just whispering some encouraging words to her, and telling her to call on her ancestors and to reach down deep into her sinew for her strength, and to really listen and focus on the beat of the drum, and to pray hard. So when life gets hard, we should pray harder. And so she would kind of get better, and then need some more encouraging words. And once the door opened, she came out from underneath that towel, and she just jumped on my lap so quickly. And as soon as she was told that she could leave the lodge, she just ran out quick like a little bunny. But as I thought about that, I thought how similar to life that is. How so many hardships and the chaos that goes on either within our hearts or out in the world can really put so much pressure on us that we just want to lay down. We want to hide, we cry, we whimper, and we ask Creator, please just open that door. Please open that door. And I know that I've felt that on my journey so many times, where I just want to lay down and cry and beg Creator for that door to be lifted. And I feel like we're at that time where we want that door to be lifted, and we're looking for a way. And it will be. That is the way of things. And so I feel like we just need to sing hard. We need to pray harder. And we need to reach down into our sinew to look for that strength that we all carry, and ask our ancestors, and pray to really recognize the guidance that we're given each and every day, because it's always there. Whether it's a beautiful raven that is flying onto our path to show us the way home, which I love raven, or whether it's just a small little tap on our shoulder or a whisper in our ear, that guidance is always there. And so thank you so much for adding in all of your wisdom and your stories, and having me here to share.
Kuuyux, thank you so much. That image of the little girl in the sweat lodge is all of us in a way, and how we find our way to the open door, and more fundamentally, how we endure the present moment, in some ways connected to whether the door opens. And that's another piece of what I think is up for humanity right now. We've closed the door on ourselves, and there's a little work that we have to do for it to open. And your life and your heroism in traversing the pathway of a real suffering to get to where you are is just something that is deeply inspiring. So thank you for your words and wisdom. As we bring this to a close, I'd like to use Natayo's image of finding our way to the open door. What would each of you, bearing in mind what I think Connie was saying and what Apila was saying and Lewis as well and Milt, somehow the eagle and the condor have to come together. Somehow the modernity and the indigenous minds have to come together with an open-handed presencing of heart if we're going to make it through the eye of this needle. So would love maybe starting with you, Connie, and then Lewis, and then Pila and Natayo, give us just 1 or 2 minutes on the eagle and the condor and the open door as we close today. Any kind of wisdom or insight or guidance you would provide for how we move together. And obviously that question in and of itself is a whole session. It's a week of sessions. It's the rest of our lives. So I don't want to trivialize the fact that we also have constraints on time, because this is worth Milt much deeper inquiry as we proceed. But Connie, Lewis, Apila, Natayo, how do we find our way to the open door?
I remember that when I look in nature, I don't see anything that grows from the outside in, but I see so much that has to grow from the inside out. And I think that one of the hallmarks of we don't have a religion. When the colonists came, they kept saying, "What's your religion?" And we didn't understand what they meant, because it's how we live. And so it's not just how we live separately, it's how we live together. And that's that whole idea of having that spiritual connection at a soul level, at our spirit level, and then weaving it in and out of each other's lives, so that it's not just that we're talking about the red code situation, but that we're practicing that kinship in everything that we do and in every person that we meet, like Natayo did with that young girl. It's that we're extending that kindness and that connection in everything that we do, and having faith in our voice and our actions, that what we do, it's not going to be one who is the time of having the singular hero is kind of over. We're in the time of having that my voice is combined with another voice and another and another and another and another, that together we create a collective voice and collective actions that are loud enough and caring enough and supportive enough to start making a difference where we are and in the general field. Because I couldn't imagine anything better than working with this group that is on this call today and seeing what could be created, and having not only my ancestors, but having a support community that I'm working in that helps feed me and that I grow in myself as we grow together. Because without that, it's lip service, and we might meet the next challenge, but unless we have that faith in ourselves and each other and all that we share this world with, really knitted firmly together, we'll just slide back again. So I like that idea of that living kinship and that living spirit, and deepening our relationship to the unseen worlds as much as we're doing it to the seen worlds.
Beautiful. The Buddha is Sangha. Our savior is us.
Yeah.
And everybody's got a seat at the table. Everybody. Beautifully put, Constance. Thank you so much. Lewis, what would be your kind of closing observation on this?
Yeah, my closing thoughts, what's come to me is that it's all about relationship. When we talk about the eagle and the condor, they must meet for sure, but they also must fly together. That means that we have to create a process by which we can talk, which we can share. And referring to, I think it was Chief Sitting Bull who said, let us put our hearts and minds together so that we can think of things that we can do to make the future a better place for our children. When I was talking about the circle, and what we did today was open our virtual circle with prayer. And we connected to that great mystery. We connected to our ancestors, and they gathered around us as we sat in this virtual circle. And when we open a circle in a good way, as we say, and with prayer, and we focus our hearts toward discussion about important matters, what we do is that we create a sphere of creativity. In our traditions, we're also up here in the north of the Cree anyway, we also refer to ourselves in our philosophy as little creators, because we do have that power of creativity, particularly the women in creating life. But when we call upon Mother Earth and the Creator to listen to us as we open the circle, and the ancestors gather around us, they gather around that sphere of creativity, and it's within that circle, within that sphere, that we can create something. Because when we speak from the heart and we speak with the spirit, we then can become innovative in what we do. So we gather together in this circle to create a way in which we can shift or paradigm shift our current world into a direction that lives in balance and harmony. And that shift has to happen now. So I think that when we talk about the eagle and the condor, Indigenous people need to come together for sure and discuss what can we do to share the knowledge that we do have. And then, of course, the second question is, how do we do that? And that's my thoughts on that. So it's a good question.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lewis. It's a very profound notion that we need to fly together, but we need to learn how to fly separately, because it's that strength of both and the deep integrity of its true gift to the world that has to be honed in our distinction, so that when we come together, it's as beautiful as it possibly can be. So thank you for bringing in that thought. Milt, I want to bring you in just for a quick final comment before turning it over to Apila and Natalia, because I think Lewis is right. Let's finish with the women and their voices.
I just want to express my gratitude, such love here, such kindness and such profound thought. The spirit that I mentioned was lacking in the culture that I grew up in. is here today. And I just look forward to this process continuing tomorrow and on expanding in ways that each person has been talking about. So thank you, Jim, and thank you all.
Thank you, Mel. Very deep subject, everyone, and we are going to be rolling it out as deeply as we can in 2022 because it's the issue of how the eagle and the condor fly separately and together. If we could pull that off, even if we could exemplify it in places around the world, that would do much to secure the path forward. Apila, what would you say to these issues?
Boy, I'm so ready for this question. Just waiting for it. Okay, first, I do grow up in a modern society. So, guys, buy my book, Woman Between the Worlds, a call to your indigenous, your ancestral and indigenous wisdom. And I'm teasing, but there's also my truth about this. It traces my journey, bringing the two parts of myself together. And in that, there's an implicate order. There's a way forward. And as you go through the book, you follow me in my life, encountering these elders and these moments in different parts of Mother Earth that bring me back into myself, that parts of myself, the white and the red that fought each other and were in danger from each other for a long time. So that's one contribution I can offer. The second thing that I could say about bringing these two, I don't know exactly if it's bridging. The thing about bringing the two together is not annihilating either, but allowing the paradox of the differences to stand and coming into that circle, that wholeness that allows them to be separate and the same paradoxically at the same time, that living in that mystery, right? So one of the things that I've done with through the aegis of Jim's Wisdom School and Ubiquity University is a model of dream work we call it Chartres dream work. It came out of the Hill of Chartres and 14 years of being there. And the dream work, just like the site itself, which was the intertribal gathering place for all the Celtic Gaul people of Western Europe and what we call the British Isles for millennia, this community of Chartres, this sacred hill with a cave and a spring and black and white rock inside, this hill was the point of creation that was acknowledged and revered. So everybody met there. Later on with the Romans and the Catholics, the Knights Templar created a big temple there, which is beautiful. And in the floor is a labyrinth, which is a reminder of the earlier indigenous tradition that was there. Out of having workshops there every year, this model of dream work evolved. As an Oneida woman, I sat in a circle, we smudged and prayed, and I wasn't trained in a Western way to work with dreams, but in a few years, a whole ceremony of dream work was restored to us. And it's a dream work ceremony of remembrance and renewal, right? It brings people back into the wholeness. And by about year 4 or 5, one person had a dream. So these are people from all over the world gathering at Chartres once a year. And then someone has a dream. I'm parking a car by my mother's house. And the funny thing is, the street sign it says Clovis. And that's actually not the real name of the street at my mother's house, but I don't know why it was there. And of course, Clovis was the last indigenous chief of France. So more and more, the ancestors were not just knocking down the door, they were like kicking it down, right? Wanting to come through, just asking for us to call on them. And in this dream circle, it came. And then speaking of ravens and foxes, I also had an experience with a raven, and I was coming out of my doctoral program. I was poor. I had 3 little kids to raise on my own, and bill collectors calling me, and I was in despair. And I went down to Lemon Creek and was praying. There's a big eagle across the river from me to Southeast Alaska. And I looked up at its feathers like gleaming in the blue and indigos and everything. And I said, involuntarily, isn't there a raven who would help me? And in that moment, I heard something like a snap, like if you take a tea towel and snap it behind me. And I jumped up, and the raven across the river came over to me and hovering above my head, fanning my face, my turned up face with its wings. And another raven starts circling around me, upside down, sideways, tumbling around me while the other one was doing this. And I'm crying, and then they both flew off, and I followed them down the stream, and I looked, and there in an eddy in the stream was gold dust. And I looked at it, and oh, that's what I need. I can pay my light bill, my car payment, my kids, right? And then I had to make the decision to take the gold or not take the gold. And what did it mean? That's one of the stories in my book about the raven. Then for the fox, as we did this dream work in the Wisdom School within Ubiquity University, we did a one session on, and it's virtual now. It was dancing with uncertainty. And we had dreamers, maybe 30, 40 dreamers from all over the world. They don't know each other. They've never done this dream work before. And 3 of them had fox dreams. And the fox is one of the trickster figures, and it's the transformation that's coming. So speaking to the reality of all my relations, we can come out of all my dissociations into all my relations in as many ways as senses, in as many ways as experiences we have in one moment and one day. Dreams are your doorway. It's one of them where the worlds come together, and getting conscious in that dream work is something we can do by prayer before we go to sleep, by giving thanks when we have dreams, by journaling to respect them. So that's one thing we do at Wisdom School and Ubiquity University, and Jim the university can give more information about that. The other thing is, speaking of eagle and condor, in 1989, my nonprofit Worldwide Indigenous Science Network had its organizational meeting at Nakota Lodge. We were out in the teepee with healers, Indigenous cultural practitioners, elders from different parts of the world, and Western scientists. It started raining, and Nakota Lodge was new. The land was disturbed. The ground around the teepee was clay with just a few little sprigs of grass and weed on it. From the rain, it was really slippery. And when our moccasins got wet, it was like being on a skating rink. Elders slipping and sliding, and scientists. And one of the sweeps up, as my moccasins slid, I saw a meteor blazing across the inky fingers of spruce trees in the nighttime sky. And one of the people attending was an Aztec artist. Oh, here comes my cat Gobi, who's got a message for us, I guess. Anyway, an Aztec artist painted a painting of the eagle and the condor, the north and the south hemispheres coming together, and how that augured peace for the world. And it happens that right now, I'm working with the university for the United Nations University for Peace in Costa Rica, and we are establishing an Indigenous Science Research Institute there. And right there at this place on Earth, the territory of the northern eagle ends there, and the territory of the southern condor ends there. So although I was clueless, clearly not in my Indigenous mind, turns out I was guided. I did get to the right place. So that's my thought on how to bring things together like parts of ourselves. And Jim, I'll be back at you for doing more dream work and connection with this Research Institute and Ubiquity.
Oh, with pleasure, with pleasure. And we're trying to get back to Chartres next year. Pila just took a group to Chartres with a very deep lineage back into the Druid Celtic tribal consciousness. That's the sanctum sanctorum of the university, is our annual pilgrimage to Chartres, which will be next July 17 to 23, but we'll be telling people a lot more about that. So Natayo, as the youngest amongst us, give us a final word. It's just as how you're viewing all these things, and maybe a blessing, and then we'll just close this out. Thank you so much. Natayo?
Yeah, thank you. Apila, thank you for sharing those dreams, and thank you for bringing dreams into this discussion. It reminded me of just a really short dream that I had a couple of years ago, where I was on a path in the forest. And it's a path that I've dreamt of before, but this time the path had become paved and there were a lot of cars on it. And there was a traffic jam and nobody was moving. And there was all this kind of hustle and bustle going on. And so I left that crowded path and walked off into the forest onto the path of the old ways, an ancient path that had been forgotten or had been hidden. And on that path, the raven found me and told me that he would teach me how to fly. And so I went with this raven and he taught me to really let go of my fear. I couldn't hold any fear or doubt in my heart. And I would begin to fly up into the sky. And pretty soon, as I had practiced that for a little while, because every time I had to practice, because every time that fear would creep into my heart, I would start falling through the skies. And so I really had to muster up a lot of courage. And after a bit of time, a hawk came by and he was kind of watching curiously. And he flew around me and he told me, well, I'll teach you how to soar. And so he taught me how to really, really amp up my courage like warriors used to. And he said, you have to be brave and let go of any doubt. You cannot have any doubt that you will soar. And so all my doubts had to be washed away. And I learned how to soar. And I just thought of that because that's so much of what we're talking about here, is leaving that old pathway behind and really learning how to fly. And so as I think of this bringing together the eagle and the condor, learning how to fly together, learning how to fly separately, I really believe we need to listen deeply with our hearts and listen to each other's stories and to each other's knowledge, because we'll each bring so many gifts to be able to help each other and help ourselves, and to really build this new way of walking. And so I think giving a lot of love and a lot of compassion as we begin this, and just really being able to recognize each other's gifts and strengths. And, you know, I always try to remind myself that you can't rush the river. You just can't rush the river. But we must surrender to its currents and learn its ways. And so that's what I would end with.
Thank you, Natayo. A beautiful final image, everyone. Taking flight separately and together with hearts full of courage and with a purity that takes us beyond doubt. That's grounded flight. So Natalia, you've given us a beautiful image with which to close our session today. Thank you all so much. You're welcome to the after chat session. All of you who can join, you'll see the link in the chat box. And then we'll see you all tomorrow for the final session on Humanity Rising for 2021 as we ponder these deep issues of how the eagle and the condor can fly and soar together. Bye for now. Thanks so much.